Shavua Tov, and welcome to our Parsha class, the Parsha of Lech lecha, third Parsha of Lech lecha. Okay, we are on page 66 for those in the Gutnik Chumash. It is Parsha Lecha, chapter 12 of Genesis. Good morning, Dina. So, this is a wonderful Parsha. It's the Parsha that we live with Abraham, with Avraham Avinu, the first Jew, the first person who discovered on his own, he discovered the one God, the creator of heaven and earth, spreading monotheism, not just for himself and to his family, but for the entire generation. Whoever he met, he would teach this idea. So that's this week's Parsha. And we're gonna discuss, if we have the time, the idea of, sometimes we are put in a position where there's this some challenging times where we want to know, do we live by our ideals, or do we sometimes break or give in order to achieve something greater later? I mean, you have this in politics, of course, where you'll have someone running on a platform. Usually as they're running, they're taking a hard line, right? Whatever it is, pretty extreme, whatever the issue that they're running on. And they want to get your vote, right? They want to get your confidence. They want you to feel comfortable with them, that they're going to make a difference. They're going to stand up to, and fine. You finally you get into office, you win. Now what? What do? Now do you do what you actually said you're going to do? Do you keep your ideals and say this is the right thing to do? Or do you do what I guess most politicians do? Always look back and say, what's going to get me reelected? What's smart politics? What could I do that's going to be popular, that people are going to like me? Now, it's not just only, you can say, a selfish equation, but the question really is, well, listen, if I'm reelected, I can do more good because I'm in power. So maybe if I lower my standards a little bit and become a little more popular, then I'll stay in in office. So I'll be able to do more, right? So you could make these calculations in mind. And so what's the right thing? So we'll see a little bit from the story of Avraham. Perhaps it's connected, and there's a lesson from the Parsha to these types of situations that we're in. It's not only politics; it's in many areas in life as well. Being a synagogue rabbi, it could be the same thing, right? You lower your standards in order to get more people to come to shul, for example, right? It's a question that we all have. Okay. So just to give a general overview of the Parsha. The Parsha opens up with God speaking to Abraham. It's the first time that God directly interacts with Abraham. At the time, he wasn't Abraham, right? He did not have the H, the hey in his name. It was just Abraham, Avram. And God speaks to him. He's 75 years old. He has a long history until this point where he recognized God and he taught monotheism, and he was thrown in the furnace and fire by Nimrod. He was saved. Long story that the Torah does not mention. Perhaps it's hinted to. But the first time the story of Abraham opens up, 75-year-old Abraham, God speaks to him. He's a prophet at this point. For the first time, he has a direct dialogue or interaction with God. God speaks to him and tells him, Lech lecha, go for yourself, go for your own benefit. And where should you go from? Leave your artzacha, leave your land, from your birthplace, from your father's home. Leave all of that. Go to the land that I will show you. Obviously, referring to Israel, but Abraham didn't know exactly where he was headed. Interestingly, in last week's Parsha, we already end off that Abraham and his family, Terach, they were actually headed to the land of Canaan. They were headed to Israel, but they stopped in Haran, and that's where Terach died. And God says, go, leave all of this behind. And then there's also the more spiritual meaning to this, that you're not just leaving a birthplace, but you're leaving your mindset, your comfort zone, your father's home where you grew up, where everything sounds right, everything sounds normal, but never pushing yourself to go beyond your capabilities, beyond your dream. You have the potential to go beyond what you think is your potential, right? So that is what the message to Abraham is right at the beginning, and God gives them blessings. God gives them many blessings. You have a great nation that will come from you. You only have blessings. You'll bless others, etc. And Abraham goes with his family, with his wife, with Lot. He gets to Israel. He builds an altar. He thanks God. And soon after he gets to Israel, there's a famine. We know that Abraham was tested by God 10 times. He was testing Abraham's faith in God. And one of the tests were the fact that he comes to Israel, and soon after he gets there, there's a famine, and he's forced to go south to Egypt. And in Egypt, he gets to Egypt. He has an incident with his wife Sarah and Pharaoh. He leaves Egypt, goes back to Israel, and then he has this issue with his nephew Lot, who the issue with their cattle, that the shepherds of Lot were allowing the cattle to graze and to eat from other people's field, and Avram's shepherds did not like that, thought that was wrong. That was called stealing. Some actually say that the reason why they allowed it, the shepherds of Lod, was because they felt, listen, God promised the land to Abraham and his descendants, so it's already ours. It's ours, right? We could just take and allow our cattle to eat the grass, but obviously until God actually gave it to us, it wasn't ours, and therefore that was the dispute. So they separated ways, and Lot settled in a place called Sodom, right, which we know the people that were wicked. And then the story goes where there was this war between the 5 kings and the 4 kings, and the 4 kings went over the 5 kings, but meanwhile they took hostages, right? We're talking about hostages, right? They took Lot as a hostage, and Avram comes and fights the 4 kings, and he is able to save the hostage, save Lot, and they want to thank him and give him some spoils of the war, and Avram denies it. And then after this, God promises Abraham he'll have children of his own. He'll have a large nation of his descendants. Will be a large nation like the stars in the sky. And we have what's called the covenant of the parts, where God tells him that there will be a time that your descendants will have a hard time. There'll be dark moments. There'll be difficult moments, painful moments for your descendants, but eventually God will always be there with them, and God will take them out, etc. The parsha continues with the story of Sarai, who was barren, was not able to have children at the point, and her maidservant Hagar was Sarai suggests that Avram marry her, and she has a child, Ishmael, and there's issues between Ishmael and Yitzchak, and then there were issues with Hagar and Sarai, and she was sent away for temporarily from Avram's home. And then we have the end of the parsha, where we have Avram's name is changed from Avram to Avraham, which we'll talk about momentarily. Sarai's name is also changed later from Sarai to Sarah. And we have the story of the mitzvah of the bris, the circumcision, the bris that Avram is given this mitzvah at 99 years old. And Yishmael and his whole family, they all circumcise themselves. And that's where the parsha ends off. And next week's parsha is where we open, where God comes to visit Abraham after his circumcision and gives him the promise that the following year he will have his son of his own through Sarah. That he'll have his. Okay, so let's go back. I just want to speak a little bit about Avram's name and his name change. So it's we'll start from beginning of chapter 17, page 86, 87 in the Gutnick Chumash. 86, 87 Gutnick Chumash. If you have any other Chumash, we're talking about chapter 17 of Bereshis of Genesis. So what's Avram's name? You know, as a moil, I'm present at many brisim, where people have a bris. Oh, what's the baby's name? And everyone wants to know why. So why did you choose this name? What is the meaning of this name? What's the significance of this name? There's always a meaning behind the name. Some people say, oh, we like the name. It's a nice name. You know, we felt connected, right? We saw the baby. Oh, that's the name this baby must have, right? We felt that this was just right. But more often than not, we have a reason for it.
My grandmother.
Either it's a family member, a grandparent, a grandmother, a grandfather, uncle, and aunt, right? It means so much to me, so I wanted to name them after this person. Or perhaps the name itself has meaning. It means something. Hopefully it means something positive, right? And therefore we chose this name. And in the Torah, we find time and again that names have meaning. Very often, more often than not, when we mention a name, I'll tell us why. This is why we gave this name. Yitzchak was very clear, right? Why was his name Yitzchak? Because it brought laughter, it brought joy, it brought happiness. An elderly couple had a child, Yitzchak. Yaakov, again, it mentions the name because Yaakov means an ankle. So the story of his birth. Each of the 12 tribes, we always say what it was, the reason behind it. Why was it Reuven? Why was it Shimon? Why was it Levi? There was a meaning behind each of the names. With Abraham, when he's born, there's no mention of name, of a reason for his name. Noach does mention his name. Noach means to bring comfort, but Abraham does not mention. But when he changes his name, he gives a reason. So why did we change the name, right? Is it why the first name was not good enough? You know the story of someone who was married and they get divorced. After 25 years, enough is enough. They get divorced. A few weeks later, they hear that they're engaged again. They're getting remarried. So a good friend of the husband, we'll call him, Josh. A good friend of Josh comes over to him and says, Josh, tell me, what happened? You just divorced her a few weeks ago. Why are you remarrying her? He said, listen, for a second marriage, not too bad. So the point is, what's wrong with the first name? And they have to change it to a new name, right? Well, so let's read this inside. Chapter 17. Vayihi Avram ben Tish'im shana v'seisha shanim. Avram was 99 years old. Vayera Hashem el Avram. Hashem appeared to Avram. Vayomer elav, and he said to him, Ani kel Shaddai. I am God, the Almighty God. Hishalech lefanai veheyei samim. Come close to me in worship and be perfect. Be samim, be perfect. What does it mean to be perfect? Rashi gives us two explanations. One thing means be perfect. Be strong in all the tests that I will test you. Be perfect. You'll be able to overcome these tests. Another explanation means be perfect means be complete in reference to the circumcision, that when we go through a circumcision, this completes the person, and therefore he's mentioning this now before the commandment of circumcision. Verse 2, and I will place my covenant between me and you. And I will multiply you very greatly, right? Referring to the blessing of having children and descendants. Verse 3, Abraham fell on his face, and God spoke to him, right? He was so much in awe of God's presence. He fell on his face, he couldn't handle it. Wow. And God continues to speak to him, and he says in verse 4, Ani hinei vrisi itoch, says, this is my covenant with you. V'hoyisa le'av hamoin goyim. These are key words over here. And you will be a father of a multitude of nations. You're going to be the father of many, many nations. V'lo yikone oid es shimcha Avram. Here he does the name change. And your name shall no longer be called Avram, without the hey, without the H. V'hoya shimcha Avraham. But your name shall be Avraham. We add the hey. We add the hey to his name. Why? Ki av hamoyin goyim nesaticha. For I have made you a father of the multitude of nations. So the word, the letter hey adds the Hebrew word hamoin, which means multitude, which means you're a father of multitudes of nations, not just your family, your close friends, acquaintances. Verse 6, I will make you extremely fruitful, and I will make you into the nations of Israel and Edom. Edom was the nation of Esav. And kings will emerge from you. And I will establish my covenant between you and your descendants for many generations, for a eternal bond, eternal covenant. That I will be for you a God, and for your descendants after you. And I will give you and your descendants after you the land in which you have lived. The land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession. And I will be for them, for the inhabitants of the land, I will be for them a God. So here we have God clearly telling Abraham, more than, he said this many times, that he will receive the land of Israel as an inheritance, have a large nation. The nations will be descendants of Avram. And this is a beautiful blessing. Let's talk about the names for a moment. Avram and Avraham. So we know what Avraham is. The Torah tells us Avraham. So in Hebrew, Avraham could be split into a few words. Av, A-V, right? Aleph, Bet. Av means a father, like Abba. We say Avinu Malkeinu, our father, our king. Av means father. And Raham, right? So the Hey and the Mem, Ham, comes from the word Hamon, which means many, multitude. So Av, Ham means the father of many. Father of many. What does Avram without the name change mean? His original name. So the Torah doesn't tell us
father, just father.
What it means. So Av is the same, right? The same two letters. So Av means father. And what does Ram mean?
A drunk.
Right? Ram in Hebrew means exalted.
What?
Exalted, a high, special. In modern Hebrew, you say kol ram, a loud voice or a high-pitched voice, right? Ram means high, to exalt. We have this in Psalms, in our prayers. We say this many times. Romemu Hashem Elokecha. Let's exalt God. Ram Hashem, God is exalted. God is high up. God is special, right? So Avram means the father. Av is father, and Ram means exalted. Special father. So what does that mean? And interestingly, when we did a name change, the resh was not removed, right? Because Avram means exalted father. Avham without the resh, if you switch the resh to the hey, Avham means a father of a multitude, a father of multitude of nations. The resh got stuck there, right? Even though seemingly it has no meaning in the name change. So we'll get back to why the resh was not removed, but what does it mean to be an exalted father? So in more of an esoteric angle or perspective to this name, what does it mean to be a father in Kabbalah? So we talk about father and mother are the the attributes that give birth to the children, the offsprings, which are our emotions. So there's the intellect and then our emotions. And the intellect is considered the father and the mother, the chokhmah and the bina, the wisdom and understanding. And when we have wisdom and understanding, we have intellect, then that could give off an offspring, an emotion of love or fear or whatever it is, right? So the more we understand something and we think about it, that develops within our heart an emotion to something. So father, is used as a term of wisdom. Wisdom, intellect, is used as a father that gives birth to offspring's emotions. So when we say that Avram was an exalted father, what we're saying ultimately is exalted wisdom. That this is who he was. He was a person who used his wisdom, used his intellect, and used his brain to explore life. And this really fit the character and the life of Avram, especially for the first 75 years of his life, before the Parsha begins, before God speaks to him. What do we know about Avram when he was a young child?
A lot. You know a lot.
You know a lot. Even the Torah itself, the scripture of the Torah does not mention it.
Oh.
Thank God there is an oral tradition. There's a Talmud, there's the Midrash, and they give us some insight to what happened to Avram in his earlier years. Avram was born into a nation, into a time, into an era where people believed in many, many gods. They believed in God, but they believed in many gods. They believed in multitude of gods. They believed that each of the spirits of this physical world has some type of say and pull in how this world is run. So they believed in the God of the sun, and the God of the moon, and the God of the stars, and this star, and this galaxy, and that galaxy, and the God of the wind, and the God of the weather, and the sky, and the earth, and the water. Each one had its own spirit. And there were like these wars between them, and there was something fighting, and whoever won, that's what the weather was like, right? The day and the night. I mean, there was a lot. You can read up about it. You can read up about it. It's fascinating, but very, I guess, foreign to us. But that was the go-to belief. That was what people believed in. And then they had these idols that represented these forces. So we have an idol that represented the force of wind and the force of rain and the force of sun and moon, whatever it was, right? Or even the force of certain human beings. Like Nimrod had his own idol, because Nimrod was claimed to be a manifestation of a certain type of spirit, a certain type of force, a godly force. And this is what they served and worshipped. And this was the common understanding of how this world came about. And this is how we should worship. And most people, when you're born into this type of culture, kind of go along with it. There's no critical thinking. It's like, hey, this is just what everyone believes. This is what my parents believe in. This is what my siblings believe in. This is what my friends in school believe in. This is just the reality. This is the truth, right? We don't try to challenge it in any way, because this is just the way I was born and raised and educated. Avram comes along already as a young child, as a 3-year-old, the Midrash says, and he already starts asking questions. And these questions, the key over here is that he uses intellect. They were intellectual questions. They were philosophical questions. And Maimonides, interestingly, who is not in the God of Complex, and not for his commentary on the Mishnah or any other of his books, his letters, but in his book of laws, the Yad HaChazaka, the book, the 14 volumes of his halachic work, where he codifies the Torah, and by and large, he only focuses on dry halacha, the do's and the don'ts of the Torah. He doesn't give you history lessons. He doesn't give you other moral and ideas. He gives you Torah law. How do you live your life? What does the Torah law have to tell us? And that's what it is. But when it comes to the laws of idol worship, he gives us a history lesson, seemingly. He gives us a whole background to the development of idol worship and how originally it came from a good place where they believed in God, but God is running the world through various means, and therefore they started eventually giving too much credit to the means which are only a conduit, like the sun and the moon, which have effect on our planet in regards to weather and things like that. But they gave it too much credit. They said, like, listen, you have a restaurant, and you have the owner of the restaurant, you have the chef of the restaurant, but then you have the waiter. So who do you tip? You tip the waiter, because the waiter is the one that provides to you, right? So too, you got to tip the waiter. You got to serve whichever plan is up there, and that eventually developed to total idol worship. And then Avram came around, and Avram said, "No, can't be." And what did Avram do? He started searching, and he was asking questions. He says, there must be something behind this. There must be someone turning this wheel. And he used, again, intellect. That's the main thing. Avram, that was his name. Exalted wisdom. He used his brains, he used his mind to try to understand. It wasn't just emunah. We talk about faith in God. We all have to have faith, blind faith, whether we understand it or not. We got to believe. At the same time, you also have to use your mind and not try to internalize it. And this is what Avram did. And the Midrash says, today you can read a lot of books on philosophy, Jewish philosophy, other philosophies, giving us philosophical reasons to the existence of God. And there are many out there. And they're all strong arguments to the existence of God. A greater power, an entity, an existence that is beyond our understanding and beyond our existence, that is the driving force behind our existence, that brought our existence and brings our existence into existence. And one of the ideas that the Midrash tells us, again, a philosophical argument, and he says the idea that there must be something behind it, right? Causation, right? It's always, if something is caused, there must be a cause to every effect. Every effect has a cause before it. They use the example, the Chovat Halavoah, the Rabbi Bechai Ibn Pekuda. We just learned his book, the Gate of Trust. One of his gates, talking about the existence of God, he uses the analogy of I think a painting, actually, right? He says, if you have a beautiful, beautiful painting on the wall, right? The first thing you're going to say, wow, the artist is so talented. But if I tell you, no, it wasn't an artist. There was some ink on the table that spilled. And then it just spilled into this beautiful, magnificent piece of art. What are you going to say? It's ridiculous, right? What are the chances? I mean, is it possible? I mean, possible, but it's the chances are so low, 1 out of a billion, that this should happen. It never happened before, right? So if something so intrinsic like the world, the more we study, we don't even know. The science is still discovering this world. The sophistication of just nature, of the human body, of just the ecosystem, everything together, right? How it all works, the galaxies. To say that this just happened on its own is something that's not so logical, right? It's more logical to say that there was something that brought it about in this way. Now, to say that it developed on its own is less probable than to say that there was a God. In other words, they say the story where there was, China and Russia and America together. They developed this rocket, and that's going to go to Mars. We're going to discover Mars. And finally, after years and years and how much money they poured into it, they finally were successful. They had the what's it called? The astronauts all ready to get into this rocket, and they take off. And lo and behold, they land on Mars. We're talking about an astronaut from America, from Russia, from China, and they're on Mars, and wow, it's amazing, right? And they're walking, and suddenly they see a stone. And on the stone, you know what they find? A can of Coke, Coca-Cola can. A can of Coke? Mars, someone must have been there before.
Trash.
They pick up the can. You know what it says in it? It says, made in the USA. The Russians and the Chinese, they're up in arms. What is this? America must have been here before us, and they sent already Martians, people to Mars. And America says, no, it's very simple. It just developed on its own. After billions of years, there was this can of Coke that was just created, developed in Mars, even with the words made in the USA. It just happened on its own, right? So obviously, things like that don't happen on its own. For the world to be created in a way, the way it is created, it's not just by chance, right? These are not things that happen by chance. You say an example of this will be if someone goes into the forest, right? And you say, you find twigs on the floor, right? What are the chances that someone put it there? Well, usually you say, if twigs fall, there's a wind, there's a storm, whatever, they dry up, and they fall on the floor. Now, what happens if you see them in a pile, like a neat pile? You could say, I mean, it could have been that it happened on its own. To say that someone put it there, not necessarily. Maybe there was a wind, and this is the way it fell, and it came, in this neat pile. But the more there's a design to this pile, the more likely you could say, well, someone was there. So if it's piled up in a design, you say, okay, it's still possible it happened on its own. But then if you say that it's like actually built beautifully, it's in a shape that's like really a beautiful shape. Eventually you have to say, you know what? It's more probable to say that someone was here and put it together than to say that happened on its own. And the same is true with the world around us, right? With the sophistication of the world, it's more probable, it's more logical to say that there was something that brought the world about than to say it happened on its own. So these are some philosophical, intellectual arguments that Avram discovered. He said, the sun is rising and setting every day. This doesn't happen on its own. There must be something turning the wheel. There must be something behind it. And through years of asking questions and discovering and arguing and hearing other opinions, eventually he came to the conclusion that there is one God behind it all. It's not many gods, many spirits that are all mixed together like a big cholent. It's one God behind it all. And the God was the creator of heaven and earth, etc., etc. And he started, preaching this and spreading these ideas to everyone and anyone who will listen. The Talmud tells us about the tent that he pitched in the middle of the desert, and passerbys came by to eat. He would give them a meal, and then he would tell them all about God and tell them to thank God. And he gained a following. So this is who he was, and that's why Maimonides, in his book of laws, talks about the history of God and how Abraham discovered it, because he's teaching us a law. And what's the law? And this is the key. The law is, the halacha is, that we have to have faith in God. We have to believe in a God. But when we say belief, the definition of belief is that I do not have to understand what I'm believing in. I believe you. Do I understand? No. Why? I believe you. I believe in the God. Tell me why. Just because. And that is a Jewish concept as well, right? We do have a belief in God. But Maimonides is telling us that that's not enough. You can't suffice only with a belief in God. You also have to try to understand that there is a God. Use your seichel, use your mind, use your intellect to understand that it makes sense that there's a God, a creator of heaven and earth. And the difference of the two is that when you understand it, it's stronger. It's real. it's less shakable, right? Because it's internalized. It makes sense to me. You can question it and I have an answer to you, right? And that's what my mom is telling us. The way to believe, the way not to serve idols is not just to say, what could I do? What can't I do? What's the law? What is considered an idol? It's also about your belief that you understand that this is wrong. Why do you understand that this is wrong? Because what is God, right? You use your mind to understand these things, to develop these things. And that is Avram, and that's his name. Avram, an exalted intellect, an exalted father, meaning exalted intellect, exalted wisdom. He used his wisdom to come to the conclusion that there is a God. And that was his name originally. But God says, I can't leave you with this name. Because Av Hamoin Goyim means I got to take that and spread it with a multitude of nations. Make sure everyone understands this. And even when I change your name, I always keep the resh, which is a reminder that we always have to keep that it's a reminder that even when we change, we become a powerful person. We are a father of many nations. We always have to remain with that strong belief in God, with our morals, with our values. Even in this situation where we feel like, you know what, maybe now it's more important to get people on board. Maybe I could lower my standards. This is what we started with. So Avraham went from a place where he was teaching his ideas, right? But he wasn't in any position. He was just teaching. He was a professor. That's all he was, right? But when you take a person who has very strong ideals and you put him in office, now it's like, does he keep all those strong ideas, or now does he try to see, hey, what do you want me to do? What's more popular? How am I going to be reelected, right? So Avram, he had his strong ideas, but then it was, wait, he may be more popular if he does other things, right? Something like the Akedah, for example. God asking him to bring Isaac as an offering. I mean, it made zero sense. Would he be more popular if he told God, I'm sorry, God, this is too much for me? People will maybe think he's a better person, right? If he got, obviously there wasn't the plan, but if he would have went with the plan and actually brought Isaac as a sacrifice, what would happen to his agenda, right? How successful would he have been with teaching monotheism after that, right? I don't know, right? People would say, hey, Abraham, you're a Meshuggah, right? But he did it because ultimately he listened to God, and obviously God never wanted him to obviously bring Isaac as a sacrifice. But the point is that even after he was Av Hamoin Goyim, he was the father of multitude of nations, he kept that because it was internalized, it was real. Because it was real, he was able to keep this even after he became a lot more popular, even after he was a follower, he was a leader for so many, he kept those ideals, There was this rabbi in a synagogue, an Orthodox synagogue. And as rabbis, we always get complaints, right? Very, very, very few compliment. No, I'm joking. We get compliments also, but we get a lot of complaints. Do this, don't do that. Why do you do this? Why are you running it this way? Why are you running it that way? You can do a better job. This person's bothering that, right? All the complaints of how we should run our congregations. So there's a specific rabbi, this is going back many years, who was having this argument with his congregants about a certain, I'm not sure what it was, something to do with how he runs his shul, how he runs his community, and they wanted him basically to lower his standards a little bit. He was saying, this is what the Torah says, this is how we have to do it. And they were saying, but it's okay, we could break things over here a little bit, it's not the end of the world, right? And he was feeling the pressure. And he was a hired rabbi by the synagogue board, and he was a little nervous that if he keeps up the fight, he may lose his job, and they may hire someone else. And his argument was, his justification, you could say, was, listen, if I keep up the fight, what's going to happen? They won't rehire me. And then who are they going to hire? They'll hire a different rabbi who has lower standards. So anyways, they're going to do it. So I might as well give in. So he actually wrote to the Rebbe this conundrum, this question of his. The Rebbe says, what's the problem if they hire someone with lower standards? Or I think, why are you better than someone else with lower standards if you yourself are lowering your standards? Is it that you want to have this position? You feel that you want to be in office, so I'm going to lower myself. I'm going to break my ideals because I feel like if this, I can remain in office. I can, and then have more influence. But what type of influence are you going to have? You're going to have influence that you don't even believe in yourself. So what's the point? So there was this father who had a job, a very secure, good business. He was self-employed. He built himself a good job. He was a pharmacist. He had a pharmacy, and he was the pharmacist, and he was making a good living. And when he started it as a young adult, he had in mind that he'll be successful. This could be a multi-generational business. He'll have a living for himself, a good living. And then he hopes that one day his son will join the business, also become a pharmacist, and eventually he'll take over. He'll have a good income, a good living, and perhaps even the next generation. That's what he had in mind. A Jewish guy, and he was not that religious. And the pharmacy was open on Shabbos. And as we know, Shabbos sometimes can be a very busy time. The best day of business, whatever it is. As his son was going through his education, his son was actually leaning to more observance of Judaism. And in high school already, he decided he wants to go to a yeshiva. He was becoming more observant. And now the father wasn't sure what to do because he was getting ready to go to college and trying to figure out how he's going to make a living down the line in life. And he knows that his son will feel very uncomfortable if he had to work on Shabbos and be in the pharmacy on Shabbos. On the other hand, he feels like, how could I close on Shabbos? It makes no sense. I can't. Business is such a large percentage of the income comes from Shabbos. Close on Shabbos, people won't come during the week, and all the reasons why it's just not possible. On the other hand, he wants his son to be successful, and this was like always. This was the go-to career for his son. So what does he do? So again, he wrote to the Rebbe this question, and the question came from a place of not that bad. He was very respectful to religion. On the contrary, he wanted to do the right thing, but he was nervous as a father, wanted to make sure that his son has a good career and has a good income, has a good living. So he writes to the Rebbe this exact question. He says, on the one hand, I always dreamt that my son will be taking over my business, and he'll have that security, he'll have that income. It'll be great for him. On the other hand, I don't want to put my son in an uncomfortable position. He'll have to work on Shabbos. And there's no way we can close the store on Shabbos. So what do we do? Right, that's the question, right? You have your standards, but you feel like if you break it a little bit, you could gain more, perhaps. So the Rebbe writes to him as this. He says, he doesn't respond directly to this question. What he writes to the father is, you as a person, as a Jew, I want you to be more particular, more careful with observing all the mitzvahs that you feel comfortable doing. Any mitzvah that you feel comfortable doing, and for whatever reason you don't do that mitzvah. So if you're comfortable with putting up a mezuzah in your home, put up a mezuzah in your home. If you have a mezuzah on your front door and you don't have on the other doors of your home, and you're comfortable putting up mezuzahs on all your doors, put mezuzahs on all your doors. If you're comfortable with keeping kosher, do kosher. If you're comfortable with not smoking on Shabbos, don't smoke on Shabbos. Whatever you're comfortable, whatever is easy for you, you're comfortable. Those are the mitzvahs that you should do. Now, in addition to that, because for that there's no objection, right? I'm comfortable doing it. It's easy, right? I might as well do it. Now, in addition to that, find one mitzvah Be a small mitzvah, if there is even such a thing as a small mitzvah. Something small that you're uncomfortable doing, and do that. Just one. Find one mitzvah that you feel like, this is not so comfortable, it's hard. Just one. There's 613. Just choose one that you're a little uncomfortable doing. Do that mitzvah. Just push yourself a little bit. Okay, that was their response. And that's what he did. And that one mitzvah wasn't Shabbos. That was extremely uncomfortable. He wasn't closing on Shabbos. He had a different mitzvah. He found, I'm not so comfortable doing this. I'm going to push myself. I'll go out of the box a little bit. Do that one little mitzvah. You might know what happened. You know, the problem with that was after a few weeks, a month, he felt comfortable already. This wasn't uncomfortable anymore for him. So he said, okay, I got to find something else that's a little uncomfortable. So he found something else. But after a while, that became comfortable. It became like a routine. It became second nature. So now you have to find a third mitzvah that was low. Eventually, Shabbos was just like a given. Okay, now we got to close the store on Shabbos. And it worked out. It worked out. He figured it out. It wasn't an issue. At that point, it wasn't an issue. So yeah, you could maybe, if he would have jumped into it maybe earlier, it would have been a little bit too much for him. But at that point in his life, in his observance, Shabbos was like, of course, we're closing the Shabbos. It's not even a question. We'll figure it out. We'll make it work. We'll make it work. And obviously, his son was able to join the business, and they lived happily ever after. So that's the message over here. Avram, internalize our belief in God. Make it real. How do we make it real? Through Avram, exalted wisdom. Use our minds to understand that there's a God. It's real. It's a real thing, like Abraham did. And then when God changes our name, when we have influence on others, Av Hamoin Goyim, keep that race in there. Don't take it away. Remember that when it's real, this is who you are, you could keep that to the end, and you'll have the influence on others. Don't worry. Don't lower your standards, because ultimately, if it's real, emes is eternal. Truth is eternal. If it's true, it will prevail. So that's my little message for this week's Parsha and the story of Abraham. I saw that there was a question here in the chat, so give me 1 second, let me read it. How do we understand why God puts the Jews through everything we've been through? That's a difficult question. And I can't say I have an answer to all our questions. And obviously a question that's on our mind this last 2 weeks. And this is a question that we always had. Why did God allow the Holocaust to happen, right? Well, where was God in the Holocaust? And unfortunately, the question now becomes a real question. Where was God on October 7th? That's the question we're asking now. Where was God in Be'eri, in Re'im, on that dark Shabbos? That's the question we have. And for now, it's a question we're going to remain. We'll remain with the question. The time will come, maybe we'll try to answer that question, because today I feel that we're still in the period of mourning. We're in Shiva. It's not the time to ask questions of where was God. We know that God was there. That's for sure. We know that God was there. We know that nothing happens without God. We know that for whatever reason this happened, God allowed it. I don't know why. It's painful. It's difficult. And we're waiting to see how the story ends. And our prayers are that it ends with the coming of Mashiach. I mean, there's no way, there's no other answer. But that's a good question, and it's a question we should ask. We should continue asking. It shouldn't break our faith in God, but it's a question we should continue asking. Thank you all.
We should be doing lots of Psalms if you can. If you have a Psalms book, read Psalms and light a candle. Do a little charity in your tzedakah box and prayers. Yeah.
Absolutely. The more prayers that we do, the more Psalms reading, the more mitzvahs that we do, that's our response. Israel government has their responsibility. Our responsibility is to connect with God and pray for a good ending, pray for the hostages, pray for those who need healing, and just pray for this whole situation to work itself out.
Thank you for the lesson, because it's helping me. That lesson with the Rebbe and finding one mitzvah that makes you uncomfortable and work on it, and then you get comfortable. That's true. It's true. Together. Thank you so much.
Take care. Have a
Have
good
a
week.
good one. See you Thursday. Looking forward.
Yes, I just mentioned, by the way, Dina, thank you for mentioning that. Thursday morning, for those who are able to join us at 9 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the Central Time, we're starting a new series, the series of Tanya and You. It's a fascinating book of the Tanya, life-changing, life-altering book. So please join us, PM me for more information, Thursday mornings for our Tanya class.
So should we text you about getting the book or what?
Yeah, you get to send me a type. I'm gonna today or tomorrow. I'm gonna decide which book we're gonna be using.
Okay, so you'll let us know.
The books, we got to find the right one.
All right, you'll let us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you so much. Have a great week.